Hello and welcome to the Alcohol Recovery Show, where we discuss practical, actionable steps for anyone who wants to achieve their dream of getting and staying well, happy and free from any form of alcohol dependence. Hello, today I'm delighted to welcome Austin Rampt to the Alcohol Recovery Show. Austin brings honesty, insight and lived experience to the conversation around addiction, recovery and hope. His story, which he's published as a book called One Last Hit, is a powerful reminder that no matter how far down we may have gone, change is possible, healing is possible, and none of us have to walk this path alone. Hi Austin, a warm welcome to the Alcohol Recovery Show. And just to get us started, could you tell us a little bit how life is for you today?
Oh man, life today is different than I ever could have imagined for myself. I have to be very honest. I have 5 kids today. I never anticipated having 5 kids. It was not even on my radar. But there's a certain there's such a beauty in a big family. And because my oldest is 15 now, I know that they do grow up. They get out of that phase where they might hurt themselves at any given time. And so life today is wonderful. I'm a member of 12-step recovery fellowship, which is where I got sober, and a father and a husband, and I'm actually able to show up for those jobs today and not just live on the outskirts of it.
Thanks for that. That's really wonderful to hear. I've read your book, One Last Hit, recently, and it was an absolutely gripping read. I find it totally compelling and I would recommend it to listeners. But could you tell us a little bit about the story behind the book?
Yeah. I'll give you the really condensed version. I was I struggled a lot as a kid. I had neurological tics that just made me feel, just different because I didn't know any other kids that had these sort of things. I was twitchy and I would make weird noises in the back of the class. And so I found drugs and alcohol at an early age of, I had just turned 13, and it was like the solution to every problem that I had, or so it felt that way anyhow. And, this preceded a pretty much a lifetime journey of, half of it pursuing drugs and alcohol and half of it, pursuing sobriety. And there's a whole lot of horrific things that happened along the way. I mean, by the age of 17, I was smoking crack cocaine. Like, it was a really, really quick progression. And, I had some large stints of sobriety in the middle of that, but where the book kind of goes is on one of these runs, I fled the country to avoid a court order that was forcing me to go to rehab, and I wasn't ready for that. And so I end up living with the Sinaloa cartel in Mexico for a couple of years, and wind up essentially homeless in Mexico City at the end of it. And it really wasn't until everything was gone. I had a lot of resources when I went to Mexico, and I blew through those really quickly. And it wasn't really until everything was gone that I was willing to not just make a change, but to hear something different. A lot of what when I look back in retrospect, a lot of what was driving me, I think, was this wound that I had, and I can't tell you where I got it, but it was this wound that just said, Austin, you're not good enough. You're never going to be good enough. So the only way to be accepted in the world is to present the person you think they want you to be. Right. So I would always present just a mask, and it was all just driven by a whole bunch of different forms of fear. And I got the exact results you would assume you get from that, which is a life of destruction. So that was a very, very short version of what's in the book, but there's a lot of ins and outs.
But thanks for that. And it was a really good summary. But there's a huge amount more in the book. I mean, you mentioned there that you were in Mexico, you'd lost everything. Would you call that a rock bottom?
I would love to tell you that was a rock bottom for me, but
Yeah.
I got high after that and drank after that.
Yeah.
And it was a very strange, being broke and homeless in a foreign country where you barely speak the language is that's a weird kind of terror. And And yes, I would say that's one rock bottom. But you know what's interesting is I've had a lot of what should have been rock bottoms along the way, like overdoses, and when the cops got me in Fort Lauderdale when I was, just about to shoot heroin, and a whole bunch of other times that, looking at it from an external perspective, people might, say, wow, that really should have been the thing that jogged you out of whatever you were doing. But the truth is, nothing ever really would jog me out of addiction and alcoholism when I'm in it. I have to get some distance from my last drink to even start having any sort of clarity in my brain. I mean, that's always been my experience. Otherwise, I will keep going, and cause a lot of destruction along the way, which I did.
Mm. So, what would you say was the turning point for you in your story?
That's a great question. So after I got back from Mexico, and I had lost everything, literally everything in life. I had blown through like $1 million in Mexico, and was twice divorced, and like I really had nothing to lean back on. I used to have money to manipulate people, or like or status that I perceived, right? And really, these were just, they were made up tools that I would use to try and win your affection, right? As a lack of a better term. And so when I got back from Mexico, I didn't continually stay sober. I got back and I actually relapsed within a few months, and overdosed in this seedy hotel room in Delray Beach, Florida. And I got taken to detox, and then subsequently to rehab at this place called Next Chapter. And while I was in there, my therapist, her name was Malia. She had me pegged from day one. Like, she knew the personality type that she was dealing with, which was, the egomaniac with the inferiority complex that we say all the time in the rooms. But also, I had a nasty streak of like narcissism, and an inability to accept responsibility, let's say. And so she pegged me real quickly, and one day she brought in a picture of her little baby girl, who was, I think, 18 months at the time of the picture, and she put it up on the wall, and she said, what does this little girl have to do to deserve love? Of course the answer was nothing, right? It's a baby. But she made the very strong argument that the only difference between me and that little baby was an idea, and that I was the only one that had that idea. And that precise idea was the thing that was going to hold me back from a better life. And, just having that information was not sufficient for me to grow through it, but it was like one little piece of the puzzle. And, there were many little pieces that started to come together in conjunction with doing the step work that we do in 12-step recovery. And something started to shift when I got out of that rehab, because I didn't have the money or anything. The only thing I really had was me. And I made a commitment to myself to actually authentically try and enter relationships as me and see what happens. Right. And anyone listening might say, well, of course you enter relationships as you, but under the surface, that was never the case with me. I would always act how I thought you wanted me to act. And what I found out was that I was enough. And in fact, not only was I enough, my relationships were more bonded and more fruitful as a result of showing up as an authentic person.
You've already hinted at some of the answers to this next question, but I was just going to ask you, are there any particular practices, beliefs, or routines that helped you get sober and stay sober?
Yeah. So I will tell you, I have so much history of relapse. I mean, I first got sober when I was 22, and I've had probably a half dozen sobriety dates. And after every sobriety date, I would always get like 2 or 3 years. Inevitably, I would stop doing the certain simple things that I've been taught how to do, and I would pick up again. And so for me, I have enough history to know that I need what we would call a design for living, right? I need to know every single day what I'm doing for my own sobriety. And so what that looks like is a prayer and meditation routine. And for me, that isn't really, I don't identify with any particular religion or anything like that. I pray. I have some readings that I do, and I try and remain as open-minded to spiritual things as I possibly can. And I participate in 12-step recovery, which is, there's certain things that we do, like we do a nightly inventory every night. And I have a bunch of guys that I share that with. we have a 10 step, which is, if I get off the beam in some way, I do my best to acknowledge where that is, make amends if I've harmed anyone. And I share it with another person. And that was, I think, that little piece of sharing it with another person was the thing that I feared almost more than anything else in the world, because it just required me to drop the curtain just a little bit to let you see me. And I feared that. And I've learned something along the way. And this wasn't something I learned right away. It's really something I learned in the last 2 years, is that, having intimate relationships with other men, which is, in my mind, an intimate relationship was always with a woman. It was never with another guy. But that's not really what it means. It means having, deep, close, authentic, personal relationships between friends. And I've come to find that in my recovery community here. And I can tell you that just for me, that feeling of knowing that I'm not alone, that there are other people like me who think like me, who feel like me, who also have the crazy, silly ideas that I also have, right? There's something beautiful and powerful about, somebody else saying, yeah, man, me too. I know exactly how you feel. And for my own personal recovery and growth, like that has just been essential.
Yeah, I really got a sense of that importance of identification with others and the importance of connection from your book. Since you got sober, do you think your sense of purpose has changed?
Oh man, in a million different ways. A big part of 12-step recovery, once you are, I don't want to say through the steps, but once you've taken the steps, right, and you're in the latter steps of what we would call the maintenance steps, a requirement of the process is that you go carry that message to people that need it, right? New people that are coming through the door. And there is never a shortage of new people coming through the door. And so I sponsor, a number of men, which is so important because, what I've noticed in my life is that anytime I was depressed, anytime I was just really in those negative feelings, it's because I was obsessively focused on me. And when I obsessively focus on me, my problems get bigger. And magically, and I couldn't tell you how or why it works, but when I take the time to actually put my thoughts and my heart towards somebody else, those things over here that were just really jamming me up, they just tend to decrease, right? They just go down. And that's been such an important tool for me because, I've got a big family to show up for. And I will tell you, when we're severely outnumbered with 5 kids, right? My wife and I. So if they decide collectively that they're going to revolt, we have to be ready to handle that, And so it's it's super important that like I can stay regulated in that environment. And really the thing that helps me to show up for them probably more than anything else, aside from the personal work that I've done, is the work that I get to do with the men that I sponsor. Like it works when everything else fails. Truly.
So, one more hit. Did writing the book help you? Did it help you understand your story better? Was it help you in your reflections?
So much. Oh, I love it when I get asked this question because I had no idea that was going to happen. The book took me 4 years to write. And I'm not a writer. I can tell you a story, but I'm not a writer in the sense of like putting it down in a way that makes sense coming off of the page. And so I had some folks who helped me write it, and they're named on the front cover as well. And but what was happening is I was going through, and I realized early on that because the person that was helping me write it was not intimately familiar with my story, I had to get into a great level of detail, had to describe what things were like. And these are details that don't necessarily show up in the memories that I have. So I had to like really think back to how things were. And then I was going, I've been in therapy for, gosh, I don't know, 5 years. And so I was meeting with my therapist, meeting with the folks who were helping me write the book. And it like helped me to defragment my life. And believe it or not, some of these stories, as I was going to put them down in the book, when I started to get into the detail, I realized that I wasn't remembering them truthfully. I was remembering them in a way that suited my narrative. But when I actually got down to the truth of what happened, it was something different than was living in my head. And I had to ask my mom for help and other people for help to like kind of fill in the gaps of what I couldn't remember. But I'll tell you what, it was one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life, and I've had a few, but this was a really, really big one. So did it help me? Gosh, I couldn't even put into words how much it helped me. It was just an absolute banger. Like it did so much for me.
I know that you do a podcast yourself and you have other people come on and share their
Yeah.
stories. What have you learned from other people's stories? Is there anything that really stands out in your mind?
Oh, wow. Yeah. So starting out, most of the people that I'm bringing on are people that I have a prior relationship with, from my recovery community or people that I've met over the years. And there's something really powerful about hearing someone else's story that gives you insight into who they are. And what I mean by that is like, if I didn't have the details on somebody's past, it might be very easy for me to judge them based upon what I see in them in any given day without knowing the backstory. And I don't know if it's this way with you, but the way that it is for me is when I get somebody's backstory and I know kind of the names and the faces that played a role in their upbringing and why things were the way that they were, I just get met with a greater connection with them, but B, also compassion for like, where they're at, what they're going through, what that journey looks like. And even if it might be different from mine, that was an unintended side effect of this is that I started to have deeper relationships with the people that I've been bringing on the show. And it's been incredible. I have absolutely loved doing it.
That's really lovely. It's really good to hear. If someone was listening to this podcast episode today and they really think that they've just gone too far and there's no hope for themselves, what would you say to somebody like that?
So I know for me, yeah. For me, when I felt like I was too far gone and there was no hope, I mean, that was a very devastating place to be. And I've been in that place a number of times where I thought that the damage I caused was just more than I could account for. There was just no way to come back from that. And what I'd like for them to know is that you're not alone, that there is a solution to this. And it's not an easy solution. It's going to require probably what it required from me, which was for me to get honest about things that I was deathly afraid to share with another human being. But there really, really is a solution to this. And for me, I did it in 12-step recovery, which is the way that I believe in doing it. But I know that there's a lot of ways out there to get sober. And if you're a real alcoholic like I am, which is, when I drink, I don't have much control over the amount that I'm going to drink. And when I honestly want to stop drinking, I find that there's, really no way for me to do so on my own unaided strength. There is a solution for that. There really is. And I hope you'll do yourself a solid and give that a shot, but don't do it alone.
Recovery gives you a huge amount of freedom. And what does freedom mean to you now?
There's I guess there's a lot of different kinds of freedom, right? There's physical freedom, not being in jail. There's the Janis Joplin version of freedom, which is, just another word for nothing left to lose. But I think freedom today is the ability to be okay in a situation that may not appear okay, or the ability to do things that I never thought possible for me at other points in my life. But really, I think what freedom means is the ability to show up as an authentic person without the fear that I can't do that for fear that you're not going to love me if I do, which is what most of my life was spent going through.
So, if someone listened to this episode today was on the edge of asking for help, what one small step could they take?
Call somebody who loves you and tell them the whole truth about what's going on and ask them to help you to get sober. And anyone that loves you that's not, struggling with the same difficulty will know where to reach out, and they'll be able to say and do the things that you may not have the power to say and do for yourself. Treatment centers are a really, really good option. The rooms of 12-step recovery are a really, really good option. There's a lot of help out there, but just call somebody and get fully honest would be what I would say.
Where can people find you?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Facebook, Instagram, or TikTok. It's at One Last Hit Book. You can also go to onelasthitbook.com. You can contact me directly through there. You can get the book there. The book's on Amazon, Audible. If you particularly like my voice, you can listen to me read it. So I absolutely love connecting with anyone. I mean, gosh, it means so much to me when somebody takes the time to read my book, because it's just so intimate and personal. And it was a hellacious journey. So yeah, that's where people can find it.
Yes, it was. So, and you do a podcast yourself?
I do the One Last Hit podcast, which is everywhere. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can find it.
So there might be listeners that we have today who aren't alcoholics or don't identify with being an alcoholic, but they're sober curious. What would you say to those people?
For the people that might still be drinking, or even somebody who's just curious, like, hey, is sobriety an option for me? I know there seems to be a huge sober curious movement that's going on, which is they may not be alcoholics, but they're wondering if giving up alcohol would potentially improve their life, right? And there's a lot of those folks out there. And so to you, I say, give it a shot. If it doesn't work out for you, you can always go back to drinking.
Did you ever wish you got sober and clean earlier in your life?
No. And I'll tell you why. I really like the person that I've become. And this is really the first point in my life that I could ever say that. And there was always a part of me that thought that came from like an ego place or like a pride place. And it's neither of those things. It's coming from a place of I'm content being Austin. And Austin as a human is the sum total of all of those experiences leading up to today. Right. So all the things I've learned along this path are what makes me who I am today. And so, I did originally get sober at 22 and stayed that way for quite some time, but I wouldn't trade my life today for the person that was there, because that kid needed to learn some stuff.
Oh, thanks for that, Austin. And thank you for answering all of my questions so patiently today. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you and to get a bit more of the backstory on the book and hear a little bit more about what you've been doing and your thoughts on recovery. So thank you so much for coming along today. It's been great.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Lovely. Right. Thank you so much, Antonia. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Until next week, thanks so much for being here. Bye for now. Bye. Bye.